Hi, and welcome to Chapter 6. Chapter 6 only has 2 sessions, so that makes your life a little easier because it's a little less. Chapter 6 is going to be working with tables and columns and rows. Back before CSS, this was really the only way to do any formatting. And we still like to teach it. We still want to make sure you understand how tables and columns work. Even though, yes, you could be doing CSS classes for your rows and columns, we still want to teach you the basics of how to work with a table and its column structure. Let's get started. The first thing we're going to explain is our web tables. So this is a table element in our HTML. They are created with a single table element, and then inside of the table are rows. They're TR elements, so table row. And then inside of those are cells, which we call TD or table data. So TD is our individual cells, and they are inside of a row. You'll notice there is no column there because it's understood from the row and the cells what the columns are. So the columns would make up individual columns, or the cells would make up individual columns. Individual cells can span. They can either span horizontally with a column span or vertically with a row span, and that's going to allow you to span your columns to make them stretch. This is similar to Microsoft Excel version of merging rows or merging columns. So we can do that kind of thing. You can use table headers. So if we have a table, a TR for a row, a TD for a cell, we can do a table header for a TH. And this allows you to use your CSS to be able to format your headers a little different. The default for a header is a bold center, but it doesn't have to be. It depends on how your CSS works. So we're going to be doing our CSS working with our table structures. Table headings can be used for the first row or the first column, or in all honesty, any column in your table, any cell in your table. You just need to define them with a TH instead of a TD. So keeping track of your TH versus TDs is really important with your web tables. The first pages that we're going to build are going to be our nightly schedule for our radio station. So right now, this is what it looks like. So all the CSS is done for a lot of it, and the page just has the sections, but it doesn't have any of the nightly schedule in there. So we're going to be adding all of that. They have a couple of the asides and the header things, but we don't have the tables. So what we're going to do is open up, don't forget to change your names and write your comments. And we're going to scroll down to the section that is ID main. So this is our ID main. We have our logo, and we're going to add the table and TR elements after the initial paragraph. So here's the initial paragraph. So our table is going to go underneath it. So we're going to go into this section here after the P. Make sure you close out your paragraph there. And we're going to create a table. So we're going to make it a class. It's going to be schedule. And inside of our table, we're going to have a couple of rows. So some TRs. And we're just going to go ahead and add like 3 of those. Nothing's changed, right? But technically, our table is actually right here. You just can't see it because we don't have any borders. And that's okay, because there's no content in there right now. So now we're going to start making our header cells. So in our headers, remember we can do a TD for a regular cell and a TH for our header. So in our first row, we're going to go ahead and add in our headers. So we're going to do our TH. And this is going to be time for the first one, and then we're going to have the days of the week for the rest of it. So now we have this table. Well, it doesn't look like a table. It just looks like a lot of cells all pushed together. And that's okay. Right now, that's where we are. We're also going to add in a couple of headers for our side going down for our times. So 6 o'clock p.m. for the first one. And then the next row down, we're going to do 6:30. So now you can see starting to build. Okay, so here's a couple of cells here, and you can kind of visualize. We're now going to be marking our data cells. And we're just going to start with our data cells after our 6 o'clock time, because we're going to be doing the national news at 6 o'clock and the world news at 6 o'clock every day of the week. So after our 6 o'clock, we're going to do a regular data cell. TD is our data cell. We're going to write national news. Now this is where copy and pasting comes in. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then at 6:30, we're going to have our world news. So another TD. And now when we refresh, you'll see that it filled in that national news and world news into those cells. Okay. So as you can see, I made it larger so that you could see everything. It still wraps, which is fine. And we're going to play around with some of the formatting on that as we go along, just to make that look a little prettier. You'll find that adding borders with your CSS is going to help you to define your table and to help visualize where the edges of it are. With CSS borders, they can be added to any part of the web table, the table itself, the individual row, or the cell itself. But we can also have the option of what we call collapsed borders. If you have a table cell that has borders, each individual cell will be visible with its own subset of borders with a margin in between them. You can choose to collapse those borders or be able to make those any adjacent borders be just one line. So you can see in the example here, we have our separated borders and then our collapsed borders. And you can see how those borders, anytime there's two borders next to each other, it turns them into a single border. That's kind of useful if you don't want to really show that separation, but you still want to have borders. So in default, if you have adjacent borders, so if you have two borders next to each other, if either border is hidden, both borders are hidden. There is no border if you hide one of them. If the border style is none, it'll be overridden by any other style. So if I have one that's a none and one that is a 2-point, the 2-point will supersede or will take precedence. Wider border takes priority. So if you have one that's say a 1-point, one that's a 4-point, the 4-point takes priority. Style goes in order of priority depending on which style you have. So if you have a double, which is the highest, down to solid, dashed, all the way down to inset, which is our lowest. And the color goes to the element with the highest priority. So if it is a cell, that's the highest priority. So the color would go with the cell. If it's a row, the cell would come first, and then the row, then the columns, column groups, and then the tables are the lowest. So when you have adjacent borders, some of these things will alter as you go through. We're now going to talk about our borders. So in our tables CSS, which is going to be this one here, we are going to design our table so that it looks the way that we want. First thing we're going to do in our table styles is we're going to design the borders around our table. So similar to what I just did. So table, and we're going to do the schedule. We are going to give it a background, just white. We're going to give it a border of 10 pixels, outset, remember solid, inset, outset, ridge, and RGB of 153, 0, and 153. It's kind of this maroon magenta that kind of goes with the rest of the site. We are going to add a font size for our entire table. Remember, things are going to inherit of 0.75 EM because we want our text to be just a little smaller inside of our table. And finally, we are going to set the width of our table to 100% so that it fills up all of this space no matter how big it gets. It doesn't all smush to the side. We refresh now. Oh, I think we forgot to attach the tables up here. Yes, we did. Don't forget to attach. If you refresh and it doesn't go anywhere, make sure that you have added in your CSS file. So you can see we put this large maroon border around it and we shrunk the size a little bit. Now what we're going to do is work on our cells. So our table cells themselves, and I want to do a border around my cells to make them look nice as well. So inside table schedule, when I have a TH or table schedule, when I have a TD, because I want both types of cells, both my headers and my regular data cells, I'm going to add in a border and we added in that border. Now these cells are cell borders as opposed to the table border itself. Our table or our cell borders are not collapsed, meaning that you can see the difference between each individual cell. So we've decided that we really don't want those borders without being collapsed, so we're going to go ahead and collapse our borders. So border collapse, and we are going to call those collapse. And you'll see they're still borders, but there's just a single border instead of a border all the way around each cell with a little bit of a margin between them. So now we have our cell borders, but they're collapsed. With individual cells, as I said, we can span our rows and columns. So in this case, we're going to be showing you how that works with spanning across and spanning down, depending on how we want to adjust our individual rows and columns. Again, similar to merging cells in Excel. If you've done that, we do that a lot for heading or for grouping cells so we don't have to have duplication of data. So when we were working on our evenings, we did a lot of copying and pasting to get those national news all the time. But you know, that's kind of silly to be wasting all that space when we could go ahead and just span them. So what I'm going to do is come over here, I'm going to delete the other 6, and I'm going to do a column span equals 7. See how it merged them all together? Same thing for my world news. Yes, you could do this in your CSS as well, or you could do it in your HTML. I tend to do column spans inside my HTML, but that's how we do that. Okay. So now we have our national news and our world news. We're going to do some row spans for 7 o'clock. So let's go ahead and add another row. TR. We're going to make our header for 7 o'clock. And then underneath 7 o'clock, I'm going to have a couple of cells that are going to be doing hour-long shows. So in this case, I want to have this one row span 2, and I'm going to make this one Opera Fest. And then next to that, I'm going to have another TD row span 2. And we're going to call this one Radio U. So on Tuesdays, we do that one. We are going to do wordplay, and it's only going to be a half-an-hour show. And then on Sunday, we have another 2-hour show or 1-hour show that's going to row span, and that's Folk Fest. Okay, we're going to go ahead and add our 7:30 time as well. But we only have to write 2 entries for this one because the 7:30 time only comes up on Friday and Saturday. So we're going to do brain stew on Friday and Bismarck forum on Saturday. Now, because the other days of the week are 2 row span, it will know to put this brain stew all the way over underneath the wordplay. And you see how we can do that. Because these are row spanning, it knows, and then these 4 are the only ones that are half-hour shows, and then we go back to our 1-hour show for Sunday. So you can see we didn't need to put in like blank spaces or anything for the 7:30 spot in places where. This is where sketching out what you wanted to do before you started is always a good thing. I'm going to go ahead and enter the remaining programs. Okay, so now that we've gotten all of those entered in there, you'll notice the 7 o'clock time, we did this row span of 2. 7:30, we just had to do the brain stew and Bismarck form. 8 o'clock, we made these row span of 4, column span of 4. That means it's going to fill up from 8 all the way down to 10, and it's going to go across because it's going to be the same thing for multiple days. We're going to have an old time radio in there, and then another couple of row span. These are also 2-hour programs, 7 or 8, 8:30, 9, 9:30. So on 8:30, we really only needed one entry, the one that came after old time radio. And at 9, we only needed one that was row spanned for an hour, which means 9:30 didn't need anything at all because there was nothing available then. And then 10 had world news feed at the bottom. This is why sketching things out before you start is really, really useful. So this classical music collection went across Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, similar to the national news and the world news, but it lasted 2 hours. So 4 and 4. These were half-hour shows, and then the open mic night was a 1-hour show. The Saturday night and Indie Connection were also 2-hour shows, but they were on individual days, and then our world news feed across the bottom. So you can see how those different row and column spans were going to work to make our calendar. Next, we're going to add a table caption. You can only have one caption per table, and when you define it, you set it right underneath the table element opener, so the opening tag, before the first row. Don't put it in a row. Don't put it in a row of itself. Add the caption all by itself directly below the table element opening tag. And that's where that goes. For a table, you can define its position to either be top or bottom, so above or below the table, and you can text align it either left, center, or right, as you would anything else in a block. So captions can be formatted as necessary, adding in any type of formatting or font or sizing as you see fit. The next thing we want to do is go ahead and add a caption to our calendar because we want to tell them what time they are. So underneath table before the TR tag, we're going to add our caption. All times central. And it added this caption hanging out at the top. Default position is centered at the top. However, we don't want it formatted at the top. We want to have it at the bottom down here on the right-hand corner. So we're going to come down here to our table caption. We're going to say table schedule, and then the caption inside there. We want that to be caption side on the bottom as opposed to the top. And text align is going to get us to the right. So now we got it down here at the bottom, all time central, so that we know that that's central time. So that is session 6.1. Please come back again for section 6.2, and we'll talk about row groups and some other things we can do.